Hi, I'm Chris and I'm a field service engineer at OSIsoft, and today we're looking to do a Pi server upgrade. We're about to release Pi Server 2012, and we know that a lot of our customers probably are still running 32-bit machines. So we would like to show you how to get from your 32-bit server to a fully 64-bit system. So that means we're going to move to a new operating system and also a new Pi server. So this is a two-step job. The first thing we're going to do is move the current Pi server to the new 64-bit box. So let's start off with doing some health checks. So I'm opening Pi System Management Tools, and the first place I want to look is my message logs. And I'm going to look for a whole day right now. And I can browse through these. Right now what we're looking at is mostly just messages from PiNet Manager. So those red X's that we passed, those are errors. So they're more severe messages. We're going to come back and look at those in a couple of seconds. But I'm just continuing to browse through right now to see if there's anything else that I feel like I should look at. I want to get a general sense of what's in here. So now I'm changing my severity level to warning. And you may actually have high severity messages. The key is that you would be able to explain them and be aware that they're not going to impact your upgrade. So I know that the messages right there have to do with the new interface that I was installing, and they're going to go away because the interface is working correctly now. So next we'd like to check on the data flow. Once again, Pi System Management Tools. From Operation, we go to Snapshot and Archive Statistics. There's an Update button on the toolbar, and there's a couple things I want to see here. I want to see that there's no events actually sitting in the queue, and I want to see that there's a lot of snapshots. Right below the snapshots are out-of-order snapshot events. And as long as that's a very small number relative to the total snapshots, we're okay. Think like 1 in 1,000 or less. Finally, there's some older data on this server. So I imagine if you're moving a Pi server, you probably have a few years worth of data. Just to test and make sure that the archive subsystem is working, I want to go back and look at some of my oldest data. So for me, that's just a year old. So I'm going to use Process Book to go back to data that's nearly a year old and just make sure that it trends okay. So now I've checked current data flow, made sure I can see snapshots and archive data. So now we can actually move the server to the new machine. And what we're going to do is use a backup. So if your server's configured correctly, you should have a backup running every night. I'm going to take that backup from last night and I'm going to move it to the target machine, which is the machine that's going to be our new Pi server when we're done here. If you have a lot of historical data, this process is probably going to take you a long time, which is why we start it now before we take down the running Pi server. So for me, it's quite quick because I have under a gig of total data. One other thing that we'd like to do is check our interfaces and make sure that they're going to buffer data properly while the Pi server is down for the move and for the upgrade. So to do that, I need to open up a command prompt and use a utility called PyBuffSS. That's located in Program Files, PyPC, bin. I'm using the tab key to quickly fill in the rest of my path. Okay, let's pause for a second and examine the output here. The first thing to notice is that there's two columns. The column on the left is the total values since the service was started, and the column on the right is the change since the last update, and that's generally 5 seconds. The particular counters that I like to look for are the ones down towards the bottom where my mouse is. So the mouse is hovering over total bytes written in megabytes, telling me 5 megabytes total data have been moved from the interface node to the Pi server since this service started up. The next we have total event reads and total event writes. And when everything's working correctly, those numbers will be the same because as soon as something gets written into the interface by the buffer, it will be read back out of the buffer by the Pi server. And when those numbers are the same, the current queue events will also be 0, which is what we want. So based on the total statistics, it looks like buffering's working. Let's unpause this so we can actually see the data moving. So now on the right-hand column, we can see data both being written into the buffer and read back out of the buffer. So this is a good sign. So I should point out that it's possible for your interface to actually write around the buffer instead of through it. And if that's happening, your total event writes and total event reads are going to be 0 instead of the real numbers that we see here. Since my buffers are working correctly, my next step is going to be to go do my downloads. So we'll need to go to the OSIsoft tech support site for the downloads, and there are several kits we're going to need to get. There's the prerequisites, and if you look in the information here, you can see that there's a patch available for them. So don't forget to download the patch. If it's patched, you want to get that as well. We also need to get SQL Server, AF, and the Pi server. But those haven't been released yet because Pi Server 2012 is not out at the time we're recording this video, so I need to get them internally. But when they're available, they will be posted on the support site for you to download. What I'm getting right now is a white paper on how to install SQL Server, which is definitely worth reading. We're also going to need to get a new license file. And to get a new license file, you need to sign into the support site. And once you've signed in, you're going to go to My Support and go to My License Activations. And it's going to show you from there the sites that your account can reach. So you'll be associated with your company, and then underneath there may be several sites. Pick the right site, select the server that you want to get a license file for, and you'll need to download the license file generator utility. So download this thing. Save it to your new machine, the one that's about to be your Pi server, and run it on that new machine to generate a machine signature file for the machine the Pi server will be running on when we're done. So run this, it generates the machine signature file, and when we're done with that, we will upload it back to the support site in order to generate a license file from it. So we're going to click through these agreements. But one of the things that's going to happen, since we've already generated one license file for this server, is that it's going to error out and say, we can't do this without a support call. So if you check that top box, it'll open a support ticket for you. Just type in the box that you're moving to a new server, and somebody from support will get back to you to get you authorized to make a new license file. If you need to get moving right away, the other checkbox allows you to download a temporary license file, which will work for 2 weeks in the meantime. So I emailed support. Now they're going to email me back and let me know that I'm ready to download my new license file, and we're going to go through this process again, except that this time at the end we're going to get a license file instead of an error. So let's select our server, upload the machine signature file, click the generate button, and now there's a button to download my license file. I'll save this on your new Pi server somewhere. Okay, we have everything we need. Let's start installing things. So we can begin with the prerequisites. And the prerequisites kits may take a little while. Oh no, it errored out on .NET Framework 3.5. The reason it did that is because .NET Framework needs to be enabled through your server manager. So if you go to Roles and use the option to add a role, you'll be able to select Application Server. And when you add the Application Server role, it's going to add .NET 3.5. So I can see there that .NET 3.5 is going to be added now, and click Next until I'm through and let it install. So now that we've done that, our prerequisites kit is going to work. So we'll run that again. Don't forget your patch. One of the things we need to do when we're moving a server is to make sure we're moving from the exact same version to the exact same version. So what we're going to do is go check the version of our old Pi server to make sure we're going to get the correct kit. So I can see here that I've got 34380.70, which means I need to download an install kit for 34380.70. So we're going to go to the support website to get that kit. So I'm logging in again. You may not see older install kits depending on the one you need. So if the install kit that you require is not available, you'll need to contact support. They will grant you an override, and then you'll be able to download the older kit that you need. You probably noticed that I said we need to download the exact same version of the old Pi server, but I downloaded the 64-bit version. That's actually okay. The data files in your Pi server are not tied to 32 or 64 bits. It's only the binaries that are different between 32 and 64-bit version. So that way we can go directly to 64-bit during the move. So let's go install the Pi server now. I forgot to unzip my license file, so I'll need to unzip that before the install kit will be able to locate it. Nothing I type into any of these fields actually matters because it's going to get overwritten when we bring the server over from the old machine. So we can ignore all this stuff really. If I make really small archives, it's less stuff for me to have to delete, less space wasted in the meantime, but we're going to delete those. One thing that's particularly important when you're doing a move is to start the server once before you move the old server. So this is what actually completes the install process, and if I don't remember to do this, the first startup will overwrite a few important things and you won't have a very good move experience. So just remember to start your Pi server at least once before you do the move. Once the startup process is complete, we're almost ready to stop it. But we should probably check and make sure our install really was successful. So I'm just going to do a couple really fast checks to make sure I have a Pi server that's running correctly, because I wouldn't want to bring my backup over onto a server that's not even working right. So there's very little chance your install is going to fail here, but it never hurts to check. So I'm just looking at the default tags and checking to see if they have some data. They don't say point created, so that's good. And check my version, make sure I installed the correct version, and the services are running. And finally, look at my snapshot and archive statistics and see that it is processing data and data can get to the archives. So that's everything I really need to know at this point. So I'm going to stop the server. And pretty soon we will be ready to begin our outage for the move. Before I bring down the production Pi server, or the old Pi server, I want to move as many of the files to the new server as I can. So I want the amount of files that need to be moved while the server shut down to be as little as possible. So what I'm going to do is just move last night's backup over to my target server, and while that process is occurring, the old server can still be up and running. At that point, when we want to do the upgrade and we have to move files, the only thing we'll need to move are things that have changed since the backup was taken last night. For most of the databases, we can just take the versions that the server is currently using, so the only thing we really need to check is the archives. There are a few important pieces of information from the source server that we should write down. We want the host name and the IP address because our new server is going to get those. It's going to get both the host name and the IP address from the old server. And this server actually has 2 network cards, so we're going to make sure it gets both of those IP addresses. And we also want the path to the primary archive. The instructions in the documentation tell you to run pyrtool-al, which gives you a full listing of all the archives. That is not a bad idea because it gives you all the information you could possibly need in order to make sure your archives are in the right spot on the target machine. So I've written down the path of my primary archive. I'm also going to check how many archives I have that actually have data in them. So I have 6 archives with data. Two of my archives were empty. And I'm going to copy this information to a text file on the target server, so it'll be easily accessible. So the question is, now that we've moved all the old archives, how many archives are we going to need during the move? And the answer is, however many have changed since we took our backup. So since we use the nightly backup, what we're looking for are archives that have their last modified time since 3:15 this morning. And in our case, that's only the primary archive, which means we only have to move a few hundred megabytes of data during the outage, so that won't take a whole lot of extra time. So now's the time to shut down the source server. Don't forget to tell your users. So we're going to run pysrv stop to stop the source server. We also want to disable the server so that it can't start up again accidentally. And the way we do that is we go to the Microsoft Services applet and we set PyNet Manager to be disabled. All of the other core subsystems for the Pi server are dependent on PyNet Manager, so if it doesn't start, nothing else will. We're going to rename this machine and give it a new IP address. And that way, even if somehow the server were to start up, it wouldn't be a problem. But more importantly, we need that name and IP address for our new server, so they need to be released. So I can rename the machine pretty easily, but we're going to request that IT change the IP address since it's done through DHCP. So I've renamed the machine to Old Blue. And I'll need to restart the machine. Meanwhile, I also need to make my call to IT to ask them to change the IP addresses for me. So hopefully when the server comes up, it's going to have the new name and the new IP address that I need. Things are not looking quite right so far. So I'm running ipconfig-all to see my IP address, and I still have the old IP address on the corp network. That means it's going to be another call to IT. So we're back, and now IT has fixed my IP address problem. So I'll run ipconfig to confirm and verify that I have the new IP address. Just verify that the Pi server is not running, and now we have to move the rest of our files. So remember, we have one archive to move, and then we're also going to move the remaining contents from the Pi folder. So my archives were not inside the dat directory. It's generally best practice to keep them somewhere other than the dat directory anyway. And I don't want to bring over my Pi license file since I need a new license on the new server. But I brought everything else from the dat directory. So if I'm not sure what to bring over from the old server, I can actually look in my backup folders and see what the backup runs, and just bring those files over to the new machine. So the place I'm moving everything now is actually just my backup directory. I'm grabbing the primary archive and moving it to my backup directory on the new server. And now I have all the files that I need on my new server. The last file that I moved over was the event queue. So let's move to our new Pi server. So we just need to put these into the same locations that they came from. And especially for the archives, they need to be the exact same path that they were in previously. If you can't get your archives in the same path and you can't bring over all of the same archives, then there are a few extra steps that you'll need to do that are documented in the installation and upgrade guide. But if I can, I would prefer to just bring over all of the data and guarantee that it has the same path, because that saves me a little extra work. So the archives used to live in C PyData arc, and I'm going to put them there on this server. That's actually not where I want them to end up, but for now I'm going to move them there, and then I can move them after the move later. Now moving everything else from the backup into the Pi directory and replacing all of the existing contents. So when we bring this machine up, we're only looking at the backup. It won't be getting any live data yet, but we should be able to see our old history. So let's go ahead and start it. Remember that this machine still has a unique IP address and host name. So none of our interfaces are going to try to connect to this machine until we change the IP address and host name to Blue and the IP addresses that Blue used to have. Okay, we're started. So once again, I want to check the health. We're going to accept this new ID. That should only happen on your Pi server. And I can see that I have all of the archives there from the old machine, which is good. And I can see that I have a little bit of data coming in and actually able to go to archive. And that's really important, because when I put this thing back on the network, all the data that's collected in the buffers is immediately going to try to dump to this machine. And if there were a problem with archiving, for example, maybe I didn't put the archive in the primary archive in the right directory, it would have no place to go, and I would end up losing all of that data. So this is the critical point in your Pi server move to make sure you don't lose data. I'm using the the archive editor just to check and make sure my old historical data is also there, which I expect because I moved my old archives, but it's good to confirm. It's also worth reading the message logs. So, if we're convinced that everything works, we can give it the name and the IP address from the old server. So, again, I know how to rename this thing, but I've got to make a call to IT to get it its IP addresses. So I'll wait until IT has told me that the new IP address is ready before I hit the button to rename it. Then we can restart it. So they've let us know we have our new IP address and we can reboot. So now that we're back, the first thing that we want to check is if the data came in from the interfaces. And an easy place to see that is going to be my archive and snapshot statistics. The known servers table still has the name of the old server, even though we renamed this thing. So I've got to get rid of the old server name and add the new one. So I have my new server name in there. I used a dummy name in the meantime. So now I can connect to my server and look. So the only interfaces that are on the server are random and ramp soak. They're not going to move much data. So if I don't see a lot of snapshot events, it's probably because the data from my interfaces has not arrived yet. So it could take a few minutes for the interfaces to realize that their Pi server is back available, and we can look at that by watching the buffer queues. The buffer queues will empty when the interface node reconnects. I'm having trouble typing. When I first start looking at the queue statistics, I'm going to see a lot of events in the queue. The line we're looking for is current queue events. But when I faded back in after a couple of minutes, you can see my current queue events going to 0 over the 2 snapshots that are on the screen. That means the data has unloaded and is now on the Pi server. So if we come over to the Pi server, we can look at our snapshot and archive statistics, and now we see that we have 90,000 snapshot posts, which seems to make a lot more sense given the length of time that the server was down. The true test of a successful move is whether or not we have a data gap when we're done. If we've done everything correctly, we should have continuous data because we didn't lose anything at all during the outage. And what we see here is 45 minutes of continuous data. So even if I zoom in, you don't see any glitches at all. Just to prove I'm being honest, we are definitely looking at the Pi server blue. So, this is a good move, but we're not done yet. So our next step after this is going to be upgrading this thing to Pi 2012, and that's another video, so I'll see you there.